This month, the boss turns 45, and after 30 years of consistently redefining the game we love, he is retiring. But that's not before he and Wilson collaborate to release V2.5 of the Wilson Bela Line. All right, today we're gonna break our discussion up into price, specs, court sensations, and then a comparison and final recommendation. Beginning with the price, the Bela Pro is currently listed for about 265 euros at Total Padel, and the Bela LT for about 240 euros. You can get an additional 10% off with Padel FYI 10. Thanks to everybody at Total Padel for sharing these rackets with me so I can produce a video like this for you guys to share my findings of them. So the Bela V2.5 line is broken into 3 rackets. The Bela Pro, which we're talking about today, the hardest and heaviest model, about 370 grams with a hard carbon fiber and a hard EVA core. Then the Bela Elite model with 365 grams, a softer carbon and a medium density core. And the Bela LT at about 355 grams with a soft EVA and a medium carbon fiber. So today we're just going to talk about the Pro and the LT, but think of the Elite as kind of the middle in between of these two models. All right, let's begin with the specs as usual from the bottom, starting out with the wrist strap, which is super cool. I'm gonna have my buddy Gonzalo pronounce it for us.
Belasteguin nunca se rinde.
This translates to a Belasteguin never gives up. This goes back to a story from, I don't know, 10 or so years ago where Bela was struggling with an injury and he wound up winning the match. And in the end, he went into his paddle racket bag, grabbed a note from one of his children that said, Belasteguin never gives up. There's a really good video on the World Padel Tour YouTube channel that I'll link to below where you can learn more about that. That leads up to a soft butt cap where the wrist strap enters from the side. 12 centimeter handle going up to this, I'm gonna call it the Bela double bridge, this kind of twin shaped bridge that goes up to a racket face with slight roughness on it. The roughness is kind of like shaped like shark fins. I felt it a lot more than I expected. Otherwise, it has this matte red paint job on it, holes going all the way to the edge, and comes with a protector mounted on the top. In terms of the specifications, this racket is meant to weigh 370 grams and it came in at about 362, 363 grams, and the balance is right on the money at 26.5 centimeters. They made it a little bit more prominent than they did in the last year. I don't know why paddle rackets have to be so aggressive with their branding. I really enjoyed the subtle touch of last year. That being said, everything else about this racket I think is really on point in terms of design. Regarding the specifications of the Bela LT or Light, we have the same padded wrist strap with the soft end cap going up there. I put a overgrip on this one. I think that a lot of people might want to play with an overgrip. And again, the Bela double shaped bridge. Note that we have this shiny bridge insert on this model that leads up to the white racket face. Again, I think last year's model without the branding was one of the coolest paddle rackets I've ever seen. I should say though that the carbon fiber coming through with the shark fin roughness does look super slick. Even though I've played several matches with it, there's very little damage on the racket face whatsoever. I mean, a few markings from the balls, but I wouldn't call that damage. And this also comes mounted with a protector. And in terms of the specifications, this is designed to weigh about 355 grams. This model weighs 360 grams and is balanced. Instead of the design 26 centimeters, this is really close at about 25.8 centimeters. Now let's jump to the court to see how they play.
Thank God I shaved, man.
Oh, there you did, huh? There you did.
I did.
All right, hello everybody. This is Timo from Padel FYI, and today we're at the beautiful We Are Padel Berlin. We got 5 courts here. It's a beautiful sunny, it's Labor Day, huh?
It's Labor Day, but we're working.
But we're working, we're working. And today I'm here with Gonzalo. Will you want to introduce yourself, Gonzalo?
Yeah, hi everyone. So Gonzalo from Spain, living in Berlin for so many years now, and being playing paddle right after the pandemic allowed us to, so 3 years almost, and yeah, super addicted to paddle as everyone, I guess.
Yeah, and today we're doing a comparison review of the Bela Pro version 2.5 and the light version.
So these are very similar rackets, but they have slightly different cores. Basically, this one has a firmer core and this one has a softer core, and it weighs roughly 15 grams less. But in fact, the models that we received are both around 362, 363 grams. The other day when I texted Gonzalo to do this review with me, just to show you the kind of where Gonzalo's head at, he was like, are we gonna live stream this on OnlyFans? So go to onlyfans.com/paddle.fyi and you'll see us and Johnson's. Was his account hacked or something?
No. He did sign for OnlyFans, so Johnson's, we're your competition now on OnlyFans. Be prepared for it.
I mean, who would you prefer? These handsome guys or
Exactly.
maybe?
We also have our secret weapons. Wink, wink for OnlyFans.
All right, here we go. Boom.
So while at the back of the court is not really where this racket shines, I did receive a lot more support basically than I expected here. The teardrop definitely does not feel like a diamond. It was much easier than expected. And I will also say that there's a large difference between a 360 something gram racket with a 26.5 centimeter balance versus a racket with a 27.5 centimeter balance, as done in my recently tested Volt 1000 that you can see in this review here. In general, I felt comfortable. It wasn't too difficult. The sweet spot helped me more than I expected. It was a little bit heavy and I needed to make sure to control my wrist, not be using my wrist too much, because then I might accelerate the ball too much because there's a lot of weight in the tip, so it's easy to transmit that into a lot of power in the ball. So once I made the switch from the LT to the Pro, for example, I was using my arm, let's say my shoulder more than my wrist, and I found that I had a lot more control when I did that. I want to pause here and do a deep dive on paddle racket balance. Paddle rackets can range in balance from about 24 centimeters to 28 centimeters. 24 is extremely low. A beginner's racket or a low weight ML10 might have as low of a balance, but that's really basically it. Most rackets are going to lie between 25 centimeters and 27 centimeters. For beginners, I would recommend staying around 25-ish centimeters. From about 26.5 centimeters, you have something that's more power-oriented than control and maneuverability-oriented. Note that balance is dynamic and it depends on accessories that you're using. The Haza core that weighs about 15 centimeters will bring the balance down quite a bit. Same would be said if you're using like 3 different over grips. And conversely, protectors on the top of the racket can bring the balance up a little bit. That is all to say that a balance of just 1 centimeter sounds like a small number, but has a large impact on your game. If you want me to do more on racket balance, if it's seeming a little esoteric still, let me know. Just comment, I don't know, balance, and I'll shout out to you when I do a video on that. Now let's talk about the sweet spot. So the sweet spot is located slightly above center of the racket, and it's on the smaller side of medium size. We're just making up things right here, but this is what it's compared to the last rackets that I've played with. It is larger than I expected. If you read reviews about the Bela, there are a lot of complaints about the sweet spot. I was playing in about 24 degrees, relatively warm day, but honestly the sweet spot was super comfortable to me. I had no problems with it. Definitely smaller than the softer LT, but you have a hard teardrop. What do you expect? Just to talk about the Elite for a moment, I would expect the sweet spot to be slightly larger because it has that softer carbon and softer Ava. So something to consider. Moving up to the net, the Bela does really shine at the net. It has that weight in the tip that allows you to be flat in power or have a lot of spin. I don't know why there's so much spin, but this small roughness or the hole pattern or something about the material used in the racket really generates a lot more grip on the ball than I expected. I don't know why that is. It felt like I could easily keep the balls quite low when I was volleying. There's definitely an extra punch that you get from the weight of this racket when you compare it to the Bela LT. I did, however, find the weight to be annoying when I was getting low balls, say I needed to pick something up from my feet. I often pop things up higher than I wanted because I was like making sure, or I didn't feel like I had enough time. And at that point, my opponent was coming to me and would then just smash the ball that I popped up into my face. I liked the weight a lot, however, in my aerial game. So bandejas and vibras were really fun with this racket. It felt like very easy. I didn't need to use my arm or my body very much. I just went through my standard kind of swing and the ball went deep, and it was never too deep because the racket is not too hard. So I found this to be really a great racket if you want something that will help you with your aerial game, if you have the strength to manage the weight. I did, however, not think that this is the most powerful racket on the market. So if you're looking for something like that, I would think about something maybe a little bit more aggressive. It's a good balance. Let's say that the sweet spot is not as high as diamonds would be. Therefore, you're hitting the ball closer to the center, which means that you have slightly less leverage and you have a lot of power, but not as much as if the sweet spot were higher. I do think that it's worth considering the balance of easy to use versus amount of power that you're gonna get. And I think there's like a law of diminishing returns applicable here. When you get a really powerful racket, you're gonna have to pay almost twice in interest when it comes to how difficult it is in the back of the court or when you're in the defense. Kick smashes, again with the spin, they were really like crawling up the back of the wall. I really enjoyed top spin and other spin-oriented shots with this racket, and I don't know why that was. I truly enjoyed this racket way more than I expected. I expected it to be really difficult to use, but it wound up being much more versatile than I had read reviews to say. So when you switch to the Bela LT from the Bela Pro, you definitely notice a lack of weight in the racket's head. You have both 15 grams less of total racket weight and about 0.5 centimeters less in balance. And it makes a big difference. It's much easier to defend with. It's much easier to maneuver around. You have like freedom, you have time, you have a flexibility that you don't get when you're holding a hammer in your hand. But that isn't to call this racket a wimp. It was definitely much more powerful than I expected. I think the LT name really implies that it feels hollow, that it feels weak. But on the contrary, I found it hard yet comfortable. The medium core, I just felt comfort around the court. Like I wasn't really going to excel in anything due to this racket, but I was good at everything as a result of using it. I can see some reviewers calling it a right side player's racket, but it's definitely not a pushover. I would compare it more to a Vertex Comfort rather than a Babolat Air Veyron. In the back of the court, it really does shine though. It comforts you with its big sweet spot. It's super easy to maneuver around. I also really enjoyed bajadas with it. I did not feel like I had something lightweight in my hand when I was throwing bajadas down, and they stayed low on my opponent's side of the court. While at the net, I felt like it was almost as powerful as it was fast. I never arrived late. I was comfortable in blocks. It didn't back into me when I was trying to block a fastball from my opponent. Volleys were way better than I expected with this racket. Jumping to the aerial game, bandejas again were way better than expected. The sweet spot is super big, the spin is very strong, and the weight in its head, though less than the Bela Pro, has a lot, and it really helped me get a lot of the depth that I was looking for with my aerial shots, so I can maintain the net. Bandejas are my favorite shot in paddle, and bandejas are my favorite shot with this racket. It feels like you can do them while you're talking on the phone with your friends or having a coffee with them. It's just super easy. Speaking of having a coffee, while I was surprised all around the court with this racket, smashes are where it surprised me the most. I feel like it has this accessible power. Maybe it has like a lot less power at maximum speeds, but it had way more power than I expected. It has an accessible power that allows you to get a lot out of it without having to swing at maximum speed. It's like a controlled form of power that I did not struggle with bringing the ball back to my side of the court with. And the relaxation and confidence that I got by knowing that I had the extra time that I needed if I decided to smash were way more beneficial to me than any additional punch that I got from another more powerful racket. This helped me with more, I'll say, more intelligent shot selection, I believe. At no point when I was playing with this racket was I thinking, this is what a light racket feels like. I felt fast and agile, yes, but then when I had an opportunity to smash, I brought the ball back over to my side of the court with ease. In many ways, I kind of think that the LT or light moniker does more damage to this racket than it helps. Yes, it's lighter and slightly easier to use than the Bela Pro, but I think maybe more of us should be playing with white Belas than red ones. I would suggest that we take this racket in isolation, not in comparison to the most powerful rackets of the game. I think it's a versatile racket, and I think it works for more players than it doesn't. The fact that my biggest problem with this racket is the padded wrist strap says a lot about my opinions of this racket. That being said, one thing I forgot to say about the wrist strap, I do have very small wrists, but I think it was designed for maybe like female players, and if that's the case, they did not consider that the wrist strap is larger and it can't tighten for wrists like that are the size of mine. So maybe still learning. I also want to say that I totally hate light rackets. I expected to hate this racket. I hate low balance rackets. I want to give impartial reviews, and I'm trying to speak about my bias right now. So I really expected to hate this racket. And I loved it. I think it's extremely versatile. I think a lot of people should play with it, and I think it's getting a reputation of being a women's racket or a light person racket, which admittedly I am, but I generally don't play with these types of rackets. So I expected it to feel hollow, papery, you know, I don't know, not solid, and it gave me all of those things. So how do you compare these rackets? Well, at the end of this video, you can probably tell you probably should not compare these rackets. They're made for different purposes and they should be considered in isolation. The Bela Pro, on one hand, is made for advanced or upper intermediate players that are looking for a powerful racket that is not too difficult to play with, that doesn't have too high and too small of a sweet spot, something that has a bit of versatility with an emphasis on power. Whereas the LT goes for someone who's looking for something a little bit more agile, a little bit more maneuverable, but still has a real complete package of versatility. The Bela Pro should only be considered for players that are looking for a medium hard touch, something that feels rigid on a warm day. Whereas the Bela LT players, I think this basically is a medium touch, and if you don't know what I'm talking about when I talk about a hard or a soft racket, this racket might suit you. I think comparing the Bela Pro to rackets like the Extreme Pro or the Volt 1000 will result in you thinking that this racket doesn't have enough power. I think for most people, this racket will have a lot of power. I think they should consider more like where they want the sweet spot to be. If they like hitting the ball towards the end of the sweet spot, I'm thinking of someone like Paquito, that he hits the ball like really at the very end of his racket, then you might not like this racket. This racket should provide you with enough power. It will be slightly less than a Head Extreme Pro, something than a Volt 1000. But that being said, I did test a racket that was 8 grams underweight. Maybe you can get something that's 10 grams overweight. So grain of salt. If you're looking for something that's like a tolerant diamond, something like a metal bone, this racket compares very favorably to that. I think a metal bone might have slightly more emphasis on comfort. It might be a little bit softer. I'm talking about the standard metal bone, of course. And I think it suits intermediate players more than an aggressive racket like the more aggressive racket like the Extreme Pro. For the Bela LT, I think of rackets like the Extreme Motion, like the Speed Motion. I think of intermediate versatile rackets. I think of rackets that prioritize just like being comfortable around the court for intermediate level players. I think of rackets like the Ultimate Tour, a severely underrated racket in my opinion from the Swedish brand Oxdog. And that's it for our review of the Bela Pro and Bela LT V2.5. Thank you so much for watching. You subscribe. Bela thinks you should subscribe, okay? Thank you so much for watching. I'll leave a clip from our playing with these rackets.